Thank you. Thank you very much. What's up, everybody? It is 12:20 p.m. Central Standard Time, Lower Alabama Time, January 26th, 2026. I'm JC. This is my very first guitar, and I'm not shitting you. I've had it my whole life, and I still ain't that good at it. So, let that be a lesson, men and women, obviously. Pardon me. So, some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about, is going to be books, some movies. There's a lot of people that talk about movies and the truth, little, you know, breadcrumbs or however you want to call it. There's a lot of people that talk about that stuff, and many of them do a really good job. I don't want to waste my time or anybody's time listening talking about that stuff. So I'm going to talk about other stuff, and maybe sometimes movies and shows, but I don't watch many movies or shows. So books and video games, which admittedly I don't play very much video games anymore, but I do have some that I like and that have some stuff in it that's worth talking about. But we'll start with books. Now, the main one we're going to talk about today is going to be a series of books by Stephen King called The Dark Tower. Don't leave. It's going to be awesome. We're going to keep it relatively short, at least per episode. If this has to go into more than one episode, that's one thing. But I thought I would just show some of this stuff. This is some of the books that I plan to talk about that have aspects of what I want to discuss. We got Synchronicity. Well, I'll figure it out. Okay. Alright, so we got Synchronicity, The Bridge Between Matter and Mind by F. David Peat, the author of The Looking Glass Universe. I found this one at a thrift shop like over 20 years ago, probably. I don't know. Gonna talk about that one. Okay? We're gonna talk about this one. Can you see the title? Okay, we're gonna talk about this one somehow. We might do that one over on Rumble. I don't know. Let's see. And this one was the second ever book that I read about alternative ideas that was presented to me by an adult. And what am I doing here? Just hold on a second, guys. I'm slow. Okay. That's probably better. Jeez. You just have to look at me for a minute. Okay, so back to these. Okay, we got Synchronicity, The Bridge Between Matter and Mind. This was a cool book. I read it when I was about 18 or 19 maybe. I don't know. It's interesting. And then, as I said, this book okay, by come on. It's too glary. Alright, let's just bring it back some. Okay, anyways, we're going to talk about this book somehow. It might be over on Rumble. Stay with me. It's slow burning, alright? Catastrophism and the Old Testament. This is the second book I was given as a young, just turned 18, truth-seeking individual by someone that was older than me that sort of, I guess, saw a common struggle or whatever. And this book's really cool. It's got an online PDF that's interactive, and you can look at what's going on with it. But essentially, this guy has the idea that some of the events, whether you want to call them catastrophes or miracles, were, I'm not going to say caused, because this guy's coming from a very, he's coming from a believer's standpoint and a faith-based standpoint. And he's not saying that the heavenly bodies involved may have caused it. They were maybe the physical reason for its cause, but he believes God caused it to happen. But his idea is that a lot of the catastrophes that they write about are due to. In this, it discusses orbital theories of heavenly bodies and, what's up there. Do we know? Are we certain about anything? I mean, I'm certainly not. I haven't been up there. But whether any specific model about the universe is right or wrong, the stuff in the sky could be affecting us even if they weren't planets millions of miles away, guys. So let's just pretend that they are planets, right? I'm just kidding, guys. They're planets. We're on a globe. This is all just fun stuff to think about. Don't take it too serious, alright? Catastrophism in the Old Testament. We'll talk about that at some point, okay? Now, on to the main event of today. Now, when I was in the 3rd grade, I started reading Stephen King books. So my mom was going to college at the time, and I was always at the library, and I had tested into the gifted program, so they lifted all my restrictions on what age books I could get. You could just get whatever you wanted that was in the library. Who cares? And so I did. And this wasn't the first one that I read. Water. It weren't the first one that I read, and it weren't for sure the last one that I read. But when I read in the 3rd grade, I read, it's called, oh man, it's called Where Did I Put It? Hold on a second. Don't leave. Alright, we're back. Alright, chat. The first one that I read was called The Wastelands by Stephen King. That there is a train, okay? This book has a lot of cool pictures in it. This ain't the one, it might be. I'd be less surprised by anything to find out that this was actually the copy I was reading when I was in the 3rd grade in 1990. I got that at a thrift shop, a local thrift shop. So, The Wastelands. This is the 3rd book in this series. There's 7 main books, and one could argue that the Stephen King universe radiates outward from this story. And maybe at first the connections weren't intentional, but he's made most of these books connected. And maybe it wasn't intentional. And in the stories, they are connected because of the nature of reality and not because Stephen King planned it. Because as we'll talk about, Stephen King becomes a character in his own books, which is pretty Inception level of stuff. Reading a book about a guy in a story who's the guy in the story and the guy that wrote the story that is the main universe that his story's in. It's crazy. It'd be like Stan Lee being in the Avengers movies as Stan Lee, but also as a character in the Avengers movie within the universe of the Avengers, and he's also Stan Lee. Multiple levels of silly. So, got the Wastelands, alright? Now, the main story is called The Dark Tower, and I don't own the 1st or 2nd book in hardcover, but all the rest of them I've got. And this is the final book, but it's really, really indicative of some of the things that we'll talk about here, alright? The man with the gun, he's Roland Deschain, the last gunslinger. The last gunslinger is sort of like the last knight of King Arthur, or perhaps even King Arthur himself if all the other knights were gone. And we'll dig into that in a second. This thing behind him, this large building, that is the physical manifestation in his realm of the Dark Tower. Now, the Dark Tower is a nexus point in all realities, specifically in each reality that it's in, but it's in all realities, so also in all realities. It's like they liken it to the center hub of the wheel, and the axle runs all the way through every universe, and every universe turns about this center spoke. And in the world of the Dark Tower, let's see if we can find there's pictures in this book. I love these old school hardcover books. Now, full disclosure, I haven't read these books in 10 or 15 years now, probably. I may not ever read them again, because it's a whole thing to get into. It takes me places, and sometimes it takes me back, and sometimes it's good to just move forward. But also, the older I get, the less I'm okay with a lot of the stuff that Stephen King writes about. And when I was a kid and I was 12 years old, 11 years old, 10 years old, reading this stuff, and some of the characters were that same age, and they were getting molested and banging adults and running trains on each other and all this kind of craziness. It wasn't that big of a deal to me, because I was that age, you know. It was like it was people down the hall in class that it was happening to that were my friends, you know, and like you're imagining you're there. I didn't imagine I was doing all that, but I read it. I didn't have to imagine it, because I read it. And it's shocking to me how much of the writings of this guy, who was one of my favorite authors for years because of this story, it's just kid diddling. You know? You want to talk about checking somebody's hard drive. Now, I guess I'm not going to find a picture of it, but man, hang on a second. We'll get to that. I want to finish talking about these books. As I said, many of the Dark Tower books are interconnected. For instance, The Stand. This is an original. This is like a first. I believe this is a first edition. I also found it at the thrift store. The thrift store had a whole box full of hardcover Stephen King books outside on their loading dock, and they wouldn't allow it inside the store because it was the Christian Service Center. And so I thought that was quite the boom. I don't care if it's first edition or not. We'll get around to that. It's not important right now. But The Stand features a massive plague that breaks out, kills most of the people, and the survivors, there's the good guys and there's the bad guys. They all have the same dream, but the good guys interpret it a certain way and make certain decisions, and the bad guys interpret it a certain way and make certain decisions. The good guys go to Boulder, Colorado, the bad guys go to Las Vegas, Nevada, and eventually they have to work out their differences. And it's really interesting. The main bad guy is sort of an eternal evil. He's in the Dark Tower stories. That's sort of how it's connected. And in the fourth book, the one after the Wastelands here, they end up in the world of the Stand, if that makes sense. Now, in addition to the Stand, a big connection in the Stephen King Dark Tower universe is the story of It, which is a lot of kid banging and kid train running and all kinds of bizarre stuff. Okay, and again, when I read this in like early middle school, it wasn't that big of a deal because that's just roughly around how old I was. Alright, what about all the grown-ups that read this? Nobody had a problem with that? Do you know how many people's bookshelves I saw this on growing up before I'd ever even read it? It's wild. It's wild. It's connected. It's connected. Now, if you've seen It, then It is Pennywise the Clown. And Pennywise the Clown is in either an extraterrestrial or interdimensional or possibly both being came from somewhere else and is preying on specifically on children, but on anyone who's afraid, but especially children, because that's really what feeds him is children's fear. Grown-ups fear too, but man, children's fear. That's what Pennywise says. Pennywise has a main enemy in that universe that's also extra-dimensional, and it's a giant turtle. And in the world of Pennywise, which is the same as regular old Earth in every way except for there's a scary clown monster and ghosts and hallucinations and things. Now, in that world, it's held up by a turtle, and its turtles all the way down. The turtle's name's Maturin, and the turtle is featured in the Dark Tower. And also, there's a cool, oh man, there's a cool song about turtles all the way down. What's that guy's name? Oh man, you guys will know it in the chat. He sings King of Shit Mountain or something like that. Oh, what is that? That turtle song. Doesn't matter. Chat, you know what I'm talking about. So the Dark Tower was kind enough to sit down and do some brainstorming. So that we can move through this a little more quickly. I realize it took me almost 18 minutes to get to opening the notebook. I appreciate y'all sticking around. It's about to get good, I think. At any rate, here we go. So, I've got some visual aid websites. We'll see how that works. Aha. Okay, here we go. Alright, y'all. So this is Roland Deschain. Roland Deschain is the last gunslinger. Now, what the gunslingers were in his world, which was called, his kingdom was called New Canaan, and he lived in the capital city of New Canaan, which was called Gilead. Now, this was sort of a feudal system, but there wasn't exactly a king. The head of the communities, the head of the cities and the counties, whatnot, they were more like sheriffs, and they were the gunslingers. Now, a gunslinger was sort of a knight errant, so they didn't wear knight armor. They dressed more like cowboys. Dungarees, work shirts, hat, whatever, guns on their hip. There were not many guns in his world. There were very few. And all of the gunslingers were direct descendants of King Arthur. And all of the guns, specifically his guns, because they were passed down father to son, his guns were made from the sword Excalibur. King Arthur's sword, Excalibur. Others probably too, but definitely his guns were made from the sword Excalibur. Very special, very ornate, very high quality, special, even blessed guns. Like they could kill magic beings and whatnot. So he had these guys that were in the gunslingers with him. They're all born into it. So all of his friends were all distantly related, but also were born into it from father to son. And they were trained their whole life. It was boot camp from the time they could walk, essentially. Learning to hunt, to track, to negotiate, to shoot bows, arrows, fight, all kind of different fighting styles, like whatever, training them up, becoming the best at that. They're like special forces cowboy knights without armor. And they did a lot more negotiating than they ever did shooting most of the time. And that was part of the deal too, was to be sort of a go-between to be able to talk. They're looked at as royalty and special and set apart. Nobody really wanted to mess with them most of the time because of these guns. So they were in charge. Now their world, again, their kingdom, New Canaan and capital city of Gilead, were in a place called in-world. Now in his world, there were sort of three different distinctions. There was in-world, which was civilized. Think of the city area, you know, the places, the Northeast, from New York to Boston, you know, down to D.C. However, it's civilized and it's populated. That's in-world. Now, in-world, there were laws, and in-world people had gardens and towns and commerce, and in world there was the semblance of civilization and society, but it was more or less sort of 17, 1800s type of technology. And on the same note, there were remnants of technology from our world in their world. Some of it they knew how to work, some of it was a mystery to them, some of it they thought was magic, and some of it was magic. But all of this stuff was ancient. Ancient, like a complete past civilization from thousands of years ago. I mean, as you can see in this picture down here, see this whole face? Something like that. Or the ruins from Star Wars movies, or even Lord of the Rings movies, where it's just completely, there was a civilization, it's completely gone, and there's just barely anything left. Right? Which is similar to things that some people talk about today, and that's interesting. I'm going to draw some loose parallels in this, but right now I'm just breaking it down, okay? Now, these roses also represent the Dark Tower. When he finally gets here, and we'll talk about how and why, but when he finally gets here, it's surrounded by this giant field of these roses. Just as far as you can see, there's roses when you come over the hill and you can see it. And one of the roses exists in what would be the main real world. And when it unfolds, it has the entire universe inside of it, and it is that world's version of this Dark Tower. And it existed in a real place in our world that is a rose garden next to a giant tower. We'll get there. The Dark Tower, like I said, is the nexus point of universes. And it's also the nexus point where all of these things, in his world, there are smaller versions of this. This tower is just massive. I mean, it's taller than anything we got. Potentially, it's infinitely tall. He can see the top before he goes in, but it's also kind of like the TARDIS on Doctor Who. It's bigger inside than you think it could possibly be. And it sort of shimmers when you look at it and changes shape. So it's not a hard, fast construct in his reality. Now, like I said, this is at the center of the entire realm. So it'd be the equivalent of, let's hypothetically say that you could stretch the map of the world out on a table. Okay? And then in the very center of that map would be where we consider the North Pole. Okay? And then at the center of that map, where we consider to be the North Pole, would be a massively, impossibly tall structure called the Dark Tower. And that emanating outward from that Dark Tower are lines of energy that the people of Roland Deschain, the last gunslinger out of the land of Gilead, the son of Stephen, those people call the beams. Now the beams stretch from the top of this, which, like I said, it's subjective. It's there and it's not there. But wherever it is in this reality, these beams go right towards the very top of it, like Sauron's eye, but without the eye. But that's part of it too, kind of. There's a lot of similarities between this tale and the line you could draw with the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. Anyways, these beams run like this. And even the plants. These roses. They might not do this because they're part of the manifestation of the tower and its energy. But even the plants and the trees would follow this, like the part in hair. The grass, if the wind was blowing, it would part right down that line underneath this. Birds would be flying, and when they get under this, they just would head that way just because of the beam. Clouds, when they come by, they just would start following the beam because there's energy coming out of it. And it manifests itself in these clouds because this stuff sticks. And, I don't know what effect it has on these guys because in their realm, these are crucial. When these start failing, then their realm will be destroyed. When they all fail, when one breaks, it's catastrophic. They have a beam quake, and it destroys everything under it. This is thousands of miles long. It goes all the way to the end of the realm. That's how far it stretches. So, in Roland Deschain, the last gunslinger out of Gilead, the son of Stephen, in his realm, they don't mention one time the shape of anything, but it is held up by a turtle. And it's turtles all the way down, they say. So it's one turtle on the back of another turtle on the back of another turtle. But this goes from the center of the realm, which, like I said, if we put ours down on a table flat and the North Pole was the center, this would be dead right in the middle. There's actually a mountain in some of the older history legends called Lupus Nigre. I believe that's how it's called. It means black rock, which is pretty interesting. But it's a giant, tall mountain spire right in the middle of the realm at magnetic north at the North Pole, and it's got an island around it. Maybe, if I'm thinking about this right, I don't know. But in his realm, it's just got a big field of roses, and it's got these beams, which look incredibly similar to some other things that you will see from time to time. I think this came out in 2004, this book. All three of the last ones, they came out about the same time. So this is a 22-year-old image. Well, I don't know how old this image is. The picture of it on that book I got over there is that old. And this is the last gunslinger, Roland Deschain, son of Stephen, from the land of Gilead. And, like I said, this rose, it also represents the Dark Tower, which is at the center of his realm, which is not a spinning globe ball, and it's a fictional story. I understand. I know. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just pointing out. Dark Tower, and this thing really looks a lot like stuff. I mean, to me, not implying that maybe that stuff has anything to do with this, because I don't know. So, he's the last gunslinger because there was a civil war where dissidents and terrorists overthrew his kingdom and slaughtered all the gunslingers, including his father. His father was the leader of all the gunslingers. Stephen Deschain out of Gilead was the head gunslinger. And they killed everybody in this last battle. Okay? It was this big battle. All of his friends died. His daddy died. Everybody. It was terrible. And he was probably like 18 or something. I don't know. The book After the Wastelands talks about his first year as a gunslinger and his young life, which he was 12 when he became a gunslinger, which is wild, but it all fell apart pretty quick after that, and it was never that good in the kingdom because the rebellion had started right whenever he became a gunslinger. So, alright, so he's from New Canaan, capital city of Gilead. His lineage of gunslingers, all descendants of Arthur Eld, have special guns, some of the only guns in the realm. They're made from King Arthur's sword, and the gunslingers are on a quest, all of them, always, to protect the Dark Tower. I mean, they have to keep the law in their area. They have to do everything to keep civilization running, but the actual goal is if it comes down to it to go protect the Dark Tower. And it's actually his thing to go protect the Dark Tower because he sees some stuff in a magic crystal ball, which we'll get to in the course of this, the magic crystal ball. But he's on a quest to the Dark Tower, and in this quest, he's as far away from that thing as you could be and still be on the same map. And when he starts out, he's 18, 20 years old, and by now he's an old man. By the time he gets there, he's in his late 50s at least. So the Dark Tower, like I said, it's the nexus of multiple universes, and it's the center of their realm. Okay, and the points going out are beams, and they actually are followed. When they begin the quest for the tower, they're always trying to find their way back to the beam, and once they find the beam, you just follow it. Just go the opposite way you were coming from, and then you're headed there. So, in this story of the Gunslinger and the quest for the Dark Tower, there are multiple, if not infinite, universes. Alright? Now, in the multiple universes, there are portals. And the portals include doors, which are generally magical, and sometimes they have technology keeping the magic working. There's portals, which are usually technology, and sometimes there's magic keeping those going. And then there's a thinny, which is sort of like just a rip in the universe made out of static, but it's also sort of sentient and alive. It can get you. It'll hypnotize you, and then it comes out as tendrils of mist, sort of like The Mist, the book, short story, which became a movie by Stephen King. Mist comes out of it, and some tendrils will wrap you up and snatch you in there. So you got doors, portals, thinnies. All right, you can't really go through a thinny and survive it. It destroys whatever it touches. And then there's Toadash, which is sort of teleporting psychically. Sometimes they can control it when they do it, and sometimes they can't. It's kind of half and half. And then there's Death, which many characters from many worlds, when they die, end up in his world from multiple different Stephen King books. When they die, they end up in some part of his world, usually Outworld. So that there's in-world, which again, where civilization is. There's mid-world, which is sort of where it's getting a little wild, sort of the frontier. Not that much law in place, and nothing really works as far as tech, and there's no civilization. Then there's the wastelands. Okay? The wastelands are what it sounds like. It's the desert, and it's poisoned, and it's completely effed. You don't even want to step out. And then there's Outworld, or Endworld. Endworld. And Endworld is where the Dark Tower is. And it appears to be extreme north. They have to go through a very cold area to get to it, so it appears to be extreme north. But the compass is in flux, so nobody really knows, because in his world the compass is in flux. The days are longer or shorter, however they want it, however it goes. It's completely unpredictable. It might skip a day. Who knows what? Zombies come back to life. There's vampires and werewolves. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. And it's falling apart because they have a saying in the book, the world has moved on, which is just stuff returning to entropy, falling apart. For instance, there's remnants, like I said, of our world and their world that seems to be the very distant past, because that world before, it moved on. Similar to the sculpture of that head sticking out of that rose garden there. The world moved on. Well, his world has moved on in his lifetime from being civilization and somewhat social and society and sort of kind of on the surface everything was normal to completely falling apart. The world moved on. Okay? And because the world moved on, everything's fallen apart. Everything has not been maintained. They don't know how to maintain it. There's there's very little that actually still works, and almost nothing that works the way it should, or that they understand how it should work. So it's very interesting. Their world has moved on. They all have. It's not even just amnesia. It's just that it's the the world moved on.